Your conference. Thank you. If you are the leader, press star now. You will now be placed into conference. To mute your line, press star 6. To unmute, press #6.
At the hiking the Appalachian Trail. So I'm going to let Phil introduce himself, but I just want to let you all know if you have, if you want to chat, share some comments. You see the bottom left-hand box in the room. You can chat there. You can also ask questions for Phil in the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand side of the room, and we'll be monitoring those and share those questions with Phil at the end of his presentation. And then before, just so you know, before you end, there is a webinar feedback survey in the middle box on the bottom. And when the webinar closes today, we'd like you to take that feedback survey, let us know what you think, and also give us some suggestions on future topics. So I'd like to now welcome Phil Valentine, the Executive Director of Connecticut Communities for Addiction Recovery. He is a leader in our field and working in the recovery community on advocacy and developing and delivering peer services. And so here's Phil. Welcome.
Thanks, Patty. Thank you very much. So I've had the blessing of giving this talk many times. So one of the things I like to do is see this hat right here. I wore this hat for the entire trail, so now I got to wear it for this webinar. The title is Recovery Walks the Appalachian Trail, and let's just get right into it. On October 18th of 1987, I got to get used to my little mouse here. On October, all right, I'll get there. There we go. On October 18th, 1987, I stood in the birthing room of Rockville General Hospital, and I was holding a brand new baby girl, and that was the birth of my first daughter. And I was mesmerized by the in and out motion of her tongue. And it was then at that moment that I believe my recovery started, because I heard a whisper, "You're not alone." And you'll see that this whispering thing becomes a common theme. And you see, at that point when I held that baby, I was wildly strung out on cocaine. I had to have my dealer put an 8-ball in my glove compartment just to get through the delivery. I'm here to tell you that I'm not proud of that fact. I don't think I'll ever be proud of that fact. But after, 28 plus years of work in a program of recovery, I'm no longer ashamed, and that has made all the difference in the world. On March 19th, 2010, I was diagnosed with stage 4. So we're fast forwarding many years, like 23 years. I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer of the tongue. I was executive director at CCAR, and that was really when things started to happen as far as this adventure is concerned. So you can see right here that there's a lump on my neck, and that was a tumor that had metastasized onto my lymph node and from a tumor that was on the base of my tongue. So stage 4 cancer of the tongue. This is my daughter, Mary, and what happened here was this day was the day of the daddy-daughter dance, and this was the time for me to take her to the dance. Life goes on. Life continues. So I did. I took her to the dance, and that was about 6 years ago. Through the cancer, I had many people praying for me. My wife had Valentine's Battalion. There's a fine line I found out as you get sick that between isolation and solitude. And as the treatment wore on and I became sicker from the treatment, I ended up with a feeding tube. I isolated more and more. They put me on heavy doses of narcotic medication because my inside of my mouth was all filled with sores. My neck was purple from the radiation treatments. And I kept losing weight. I lost about 85 pounds, and I found myself isolating more and more. And finally, the love of my friends, my family, the recovery community, many of you who are out there now, restored me to some health. And I was able to speak at recovery walks in 2010, and finally able to wear my favorite golf pants and get back out on the course. So I'm glad to report that after that treatment, 39 radiation treatments, 2 inpatient chemo stays, a feeding tube, that the cancer is gone. So what happened after all that? Well, what happened after that was that I learned truly that each day is a gift. I learned that to ask for help, because I think one of the problems of people who are in tune to giving care and helping others is that they find it difficult to ask for help for themselves. And really the last one is to let love in, because you see, I was very good at loving others, or maybe not even good is the right word. I was capable of it, but when people wanted to love me, I had the same response as my 2-year-old son, Matthew, receiving a little love from his bigger sister, Sam. And yes, the apple does not fall far from the tree. So that was kind of my lesson, that when I was down and out and in the throes of this treatment, that I needed to let people love me. I needed to let love in. This is about the time as I was healing from this. You know, I finished treatments roughly in September. In October, I finally got myself off of all the narcotic medication, even though the doctors wanted to keep me on it for a lot longer. And I was shaking apart. I was literally shaking, full of anxiety. And I heard a whisper in my head that really I believe was the voice of God, the voice of my higher power. And the call was to, I want you to hike the Appalachian Trail. And my immediate response was, the whole thing? And he said, yeah, the whole thing. So the first person I told was my wife, and she said, that's sweet, honey. You're so cute. And she tolerated me and humored me, because really, what was this call and what was it asking me to do? The Appalachian Trail, hiking it, is a huge feat. I wasn't much of a hiker. I was more of a surf fisherman or a kayak fisherman. So the first thing it's 2,189.2 miles long. It's from Georgia to Maine. It's like climbing Mount Everest 16 times, going up and down just with the amount of elevation changes on the trail. It's through 14 states, 5 million steps or so, and I found out on my iPhone that it was recording my steps all along. And granted, I had it off sometimes, my iPhone, and I took 5,500,000 steps. So being older and a little slower, I think I had to take a lot more steps. It took me 6 months, 189 days, 6 months and 3 days roughly. Less than 15,000 people have ever completed a thru hike. A thru hike is doing it in one stretch. You know, a lot of people do it in sections over the course of several years, and that's very cool. But only 15,000 people have done it like in one continuous path. So on March 19th, 2015, you notice that is exactly 5 years to the day I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer of the tongue. I found myself on Springer Mountain, Georgia. And I guess the real blessing to that was 2 years prior, I had to go to the board of directors of the Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery and say, you know what, I'm going to need about 6 months off. I'm thinking about walking the Appalachian Trail. Well, I am going to walk the Appalachian Trail, give it the best shot. So I wanted to let you know in plenty of time if we have to make a succession plan, put it in place, if I need to take a sabbatical or whatever it is you want to do. I just want to put that decision in your hands. And they said, Phil, if you can put your face on recovery, if you can utilize social media and keep people posted about your walk, we can think of no better way to put a face on recovery, so we will support you. And when I came home and told my wife about that, she was like, wow, this just got real. And I said, wow, this just got real. And it was a real tough thing for me to to, well, not tough, but thrilling, but it became real. I didn't have any excuses anymore. So as on March 19th, 2015, I was on the summit, and you might recognize that person. She's a little sideways, but that's okay. That's our good buddy, Neil Campbell, and she drove me to Springer Mountain, Georgia. And if you think I'm making stuff up, she can attest to this day anyway. And it was cold. It was rainy. It was windy. It was scary. And I'll tell you what, that this moment on the southern terminus of the Appalachian Trail was one of the most emotional moments of the entire journey for me, because my goal was never to finish the Appalachian Trail. I'm telling you, my goal was never to finish the Appalachian Trail. My goal was to start. And I started. And I think a lot of times we have things on our bucket list that we intend to do, but we never get the time, or it's never convenient. So I had set a date 5 years from the day of being diagnosed that I was actually going to start the trail, and that's what I did. And it wasn't a good day to start, because it was really cold, wet, and windy. Neil we had to go backwards to this terminus. She walked back with me to the parking lot, and I found, I was standing in the parking lot wondering what's next, you know? And so the theme for all of this, though, really is just to begin. And I had begun. And then a few minutes later, I found myself, Neil took this picture of me at Springer Mountain. Still don't have my backpack on. I got my brand new trekking poles. My sea-car hat was looking shiny and new. She drove away, and I was standing there like in the pouring rain, cold, and the only thing I had left to do, I had no choice but to continue. So I started. And 4 days into the trip, I had to reassess. I had to look at everything. I had to, this shakedown, because this was all the gear I was carrying. And with food and water, all of this was about 39 pounds on my back. And that was a lot of weight. And I struggled to go 30 miles in 4 days. You know, by the end of my trip, that seems laughable, because I could cover that in a day and a half if I really worked at it, easily in 2 days. And so we went to this place called Mountain Crossing, and this dude's name is Pretzel, and he helped me strip everything down. I got rid of 13 pounds worth, so I didn't carry much over 25 pounds from that point forward. I got a new pack that was lighter. I was able to move. And the whole lesson for me was, and I'm feeling light and exuberant right here, I accepted somebody else's suggestions, somebody that had a lot more experience than me. And that seems to me a lot like a recovery principle. You know, people go ahead of you. Maybe we were wise to listen to them. But the whole idea, too, is to really just lighten your load, because the lighter your load, the farther you travel, and the more enjoyable the journey. So lighten your load, and that's not only physically, it's mentally and emotionally, because I was thinking about work still. I was thinking about my family, and when I got shed that weight, it was symbolic to me also of I had to let go of my work priorities. I had to focus on the task at hand. I had to put my family in the hands of God and trust Sandy and everybody else that they'd be okay, and they were. And so when my load became lighter, I actually started to think 4 days in that I had a legitimate chance. I still wasn't convinced, but I had a legitimate chance that I could do it. And so let me just go through this and kind of tell you what the trail is like. And a lot of my Facebook posts and Instagram posts started with sometimes the trail is. And so sometimes the trail is a little rocky. Sometimes the trail is well defined for a little while. Sometimes the trail is picturesque. Sometimes the trail is really rocky. And this is a picture in Pennsylvania. And no offense to anybody in Pennsylvania, but the trail, I always say, Pennsylvania sucks, because this is what it looks like for a lot of the trail. And sometimes when I do that in large audiences, I get the whole audience to say, Pennsylvania sucks. Sometimes the trail is flower-lined. Sometimes the trail is steep, and you need a ladder. Sometimes the trail is soft and inviting. Sometimes the trail is a bridge between two states. Substitute life for the word trail. Sometimes the trail, it leads to the unknown. Sometimes the trail is abrasive. Sometimes the trail is, and this is a video, but it's a video over a gorge. So I don't know what happened. We just, yep. And so we'll just continue. And I got to move my ball up there. We had some other pictures of other things, but that's okay. We're working with technology. And so sometimes the trail is into a cave where the going gets dark. And this has been one of my favorite pictures on the trail, because that's actually where the trail went. Sometimes the trail is sometimes the trail is a way up to a promising opportunity. And sometimes the trail is smooth, real smooth. And I love that pine needle covered trail, very soft on the feet. The theme for all of this, though, is really about continuing. So no matter what the trail conditions are, we always need to continue. Things are barking now and things are going on, but we will get through this. So let me tell you a little bit about Tough Love. And Tough Love is my daughter, Samantha. That's her trail name. My trail name is, I guess it still is, once you get a trail name, you always have a trail name, is Right Click. And that was because my right knee clicked going up hills. It had nothing to do with my computer capability, but it had to do with my right knee clicking as I went uphill. So Tough Love came out with me after her semester at college. She had never hiked before. She was 18 years old at the time. Her name was Tough Love because one time we were walking on the trail and we were also hiking with Paradox and Rock Steady, and I caught up to them. They were resting. I said, Sam, can I have some of your water? And she goes, Dad, we went by 5 places already where you could have got water. No, you can't have any of my water. And so Rock Steady in her usual voice goes, dang, that's some tough love. And that's how her trail name was born. So we saw some incredible sights together. This is near Mount Rogers in the Grayson Highlands. We camped here one night, and this is the morning where we actually woke up and there were wild ponies all around our tent, sticking their noses in our tents. This is Tough Love with Charlize Theron. That's what I call her because of her beautiful blonde hair. Not Tough Love, the pony. And then this is her in the Lemon Squeezer, some tough places where we had to hike. And then she got to see places like this view on McAfee Knob, one of the most photographed places on the entire trail. And then she liked to give her dad heart attacks. This is kind of sideways, at least on my screen, and I don't know why that does that. But she's sitting way out on the edge of this beautiful spot where you get your pictures taken. I guess the point of all this is that in order to keep it, we must give it away. So I had hiked about 650 miles when she joined us, And so I was getting a little experienced, and but by me helping to teach her, I really received a lot. So I shared my experience, strength, and hope. Sound familiar? But in turn, by doing that, I was the one helped, and she was a huge boost to my morale and to my ability to finish the hike. We got to this place called Dragon's Tooth, and this just happened to be a little before McAfee's Knob, and it's a rock monolith about 1/10 of a mile off the trail, and it looks like that. And then this picture is actually of our friend Paradox up on the top of it. There was no way that this old guy was going to climb up there. And so on the way down, it was actually the first time that we had some really, I would say, real steep and tough descents. There would be a lot more once we got to New England. But this was really one of the tougher spots. And as we climbed down this, it got really difficult. And this is Rocksteady, Tough Love, and Paradox. And so one of the things that I did, well, I let them go down, because going downhill, I wasn't that good. Going uphill, I was actually pretty good. But downhill terrified me because I was always afraid of falling. And so they went ahead of me, and I got to this place where there was 2 rocks angled away from me, and I could see how the tail of the trail was wound its way, and it was flat, so it was the bottom. And so I put my right foot down, I put my left foot down, and as I put my left foot down, it gave way, and my right foot caught, and as I slid down, it wrapped behind my neck. My knee popped twice loudly. I was in searing pain, and I couldn't believe the pain I was in. And I crumpled to the bottom. There were tears flowing out of my eyes. I was writhing in pain, and I brought myself up to sitting and wrapped my arms around my knees. And I said to myself, I cannot believe my trip ended this way. And then I said, I have no idea how I'm going to get down off of this mountain. And as soon as I had that thought, I was completely alone. I felt 2 hands on my shoulders. I felt warmth coursing through my body, and I heard a whisper in my left ear, and it said, "You're okay." And at first I didn't believe it. I stood up, and I jumped up, actually, and I said, I'm okay. And I found my trekking poles that went flying, and I walked down the trail. And the first thing feeling I had, emotion, was doubt. Did that really happen? And I looked, and there were still tears on my cheeks, and I was scraped and dirty and dusty, and my knee felt fine. I said, yeah, I guess it did. And then I felt unworthy. Like, who am I? Did something just come down and heal me? Who am I? Who am I? I felt unworthy. And then I finally got angry, and I said, you're not going to let me quit no matter what, are you? And through all of that, I finally caught up to where they were resting. I told my daughter the story, and she's a young woman of deep faith, and tears streamed down her eyes. And Paradox and Rocksteady are not really sure what to make of all that. And Rocksteady, in her voice, goes, dang, right click, you're not going to be able to quit no matter what, so you might as well just quit your complaining and your whining and keep hiking. And the message is, over and over again, you get the same kind of themes. And this is me after the fall at the 700-mile mark with my daughter, and this is us on McAfee Knob the next day, and that's where my daughter was sitting out there. Always remember the themes, though, that you have to surrender to win, and it's the paradox of recovery. And so I finally surrendered that I was in control of this journey a little bit, that I had real choices, that I was going to have to keep walking no matter what. But I knew now that a power greater than myself, I knew that God was with me at the whole time. And not that I really doubted it before, but he had to make himself present. And so I continued. Which brings me all the way up to Bake Oven Knob. So Sam had gone home by now. She went home on her birthday in May. And it's around July, and I'm in late June, early July. Bake Oven Knob in Pennsylvania. Did I tell you about Pennsylvania yet? Oh, yeah, Pennsylvania sucks. It does. And there's just 150 miles of sharp rocks that just chew up your boots, chew up your feet, chew up your attitude. And by the time I got to this place here, the knife edge, you actually had to walk up that. Anytime you see a little white blaze, that's the actual trail. You had to walk up this kind of Mohawk mountain of rock. And on either side, there was flat trail. But, of course, the Appalachian Trail takes you over the top of this. So that was discouraging, and coming down the other side was long and hard. By the time I'd hiked 16 miles over these rocks, I had to go up this thing, up Bake Oven, it's actually called. And I got to the top of Bake Oven. This wasn't that bad, but on the other side, the rocks were so steep and it was like a jungle gym. It took me an hour to go like 2/10 of a mile. And I was so frustrated that I finally got to the shelter. The shelter was all overgrown and stinky and crabby, and so there was a better campsite up top. So I went back up to the trail, set up my tent, and literally my feet were aching. I was tired. I was hungry. I was angry. I was lonely. I was tired. Sound familiar? Halt. And so I called Sandy and said, I don't think I can make it. Come pick me up. And she said, well, I can't come get you now. I said, well, there's a road about 7 miles ahead. How about you pick me up there? And she said, why don't you call me when you get to the road and we'll see what happens. And I'm like, fine. And so I started to eat dinner up there, and then I realized I didn't have water, so I had to go down and get water. As I went by the shelter, I met this man. His trail name was Just Doug, and he got that name because people asked him what his name was, and he said Just Doug. His real name was Doug, and so Just Doug became his trail name. And he was a retired cop. He had retired in February and was on the trail in March. And he had been a cop in Cleveland for 36 years, captain of the downtown unit, had 5 daughters and 1 son, just a solid human being. But he looked exactly like I felt. And we connected almost immediately. And I said, hey, you want to see if we want to hike down to the road together tomorrow? And he's like, sure. And then as we were hiking down the road the next day, he said, maybe we can get out of Pennsylvania together. And I said, sure. And then before you knew it, he and I finished the hike in Maine together. So it was another one of those little miracles, you know. We saw lots of wildlife together. Like the very first day, I ended up seeing 15 bears. In this picture, it's the elusive 3-bear selfie. And so that's mama bear and 2 cubs off in the distance. And some people said, that might have been the last picture you ever took. No, the mother bear wasn't aggressive at all. I wouldn't have turned my back if I had thought that. And she was actually kind of training her cubs to go up and down trees while we walked by and to her signal, which was fascinating to see. So we saw 15 bears together, numerous deer. I ended up seeing 4 moose, all kinds of snakes, but we don't need to talk about that part. I also had other friends. In this picture, you know, we had different crews at different times, and that's Paradox, Rocksteady, Low Profile, and Styx. And we were leaving North Carolina, heading into Tennessee on a really cold day, rainy day. And this is the crew that hit the 500-mile mark with. And then this is the crew that came up into Vermont and helped us out, guys from my church. And Mockingbird and Dr. Pickles and Just Doug are in there too. And then this is the last day where we're all together in Vermont or New Hampshire camping together before I set out to do Maine together. And my kids were with me. What's the theme of this? The theme of this is that, like recovery, you develop incredibly deep friendships and incredible support. And this is the crew, my final crew, that was going into Maine and New Hampshire together. Pickles is in the green shirt, Mockingbird is in the purple, and they're a young married couple, and their marriage actually got stronger after 6 months together, sleeping in a tiny little tent. Hard to believe, but it worked. And so the theme is, of course, all about peer support, and I think we need the next deck, Patty. So, yep, we're going to roll one more deck in. We're getting the wizard behind the curtain. So this theme is definitely peer support, and you can also call it mutual aid. You know, they helped me, and I like to believe that sometimes I might have helped them a little bit too. I did have a sense of humor some of the time, you know, but other times I could be downright like the old grumpy dude, so you never knew which fill you were going to get. But near the end, I became more and more in tune and friendly and not griping nearly as much, really realizing what a benefit I had, what a blessing I had, an opportunity. And so then what brings us to Riptide, which happens to be my 13-year-old son, Matthew. And he got Riptide because of his love for the ocean and love for water. Dr. Pickles gave him that. So to have your 13-year-old son, I have 5 kids. They're now 29, 22, 20, 14, and 11. And so this is my 4th child. And he gave up a Cape Cod vacation to go hiking with his dad through Vermont. And we're up on, I think it might be the Stratton Fire Tower in Vermont. He loves to hike, and he's an athletic type of kid, and he would just out hike me. He was worried about slowing me down. I was worried about keeping up with him. He was a solid athlete, so much fun to be with, great attitude. He ended up getting some bad rashes under your arms and on your feet. That happens a lot on the trail. And he handled it all beautifully with very little complaining. This is him on Killington, and this was one of our longest days, step-wise, biggest days, about 51,000 steps this day. And this was a magic moment with a couple of rain showers and beautiful light, standing on a peak, and it really helped me focus in on the number one gift of recovery. And it's also the number one factor I look for when hiring employees now, to be frank, is gratitude. And there's special moments in life, and I think that's what you take with you. You know, like, what was the guy in Ghost, Patrick Swayze's character? He talked about, Molly, the love, you take it with you. And I think what you take with you is your moments of gratitude, your moments of love. I think they're worth more than gold. And recovery taught me all that, too. There are always challenging conditions on the trail, always. And they post signs like this, that this trail can be extremely slippery when icy or wet. Be cautious and consider an alternate route. You know, when we read that sign, of course, after we came down, and there is no alternate route, so you didn't really have much choice. But I'm telling you, the descents through the White Mountains and things really started to wear on me. These were like straight up rocks, and those rocks are slippery. Those stairs are pretty slippery too, so you have to be careful. It got cold sometimes at night. One day we got down into the single digits, and we woke up to snow a couple times early on in the trail. They could be rough and muddy, rocky, wet, slick, incredibly hot, knock the crap out of you. Paradox is up there smiling, Rocksteady's on her side, kind of gassed from the heat. I was more surprised about the heat during this trip than anything, how much water you had to drink and to keep hydrated, and at night being all sticky and gross, and you just get used to that too. I knew I was a thru hiker when I was sitting in my tent and I had my shirt off and just trying to cool down, and I felt something crawling on my back, and without thinking about it, I just picked it, smushed it, and threw it in the corner. And I said, wow, well, that's different. You know, it didn't even bother me at all. Another sign, the trail is extremely tough. If you lack experience, please use another trail. Special care at the Cascades to avoid tragic results. I didn't want any tragic results. That wouldn't have been good. Sometimes the trail is real tough terrain. It's just tough. And you have to watch every step, and you can't move real quickly. And then, of course, Mount Washington is known for how many people have died there. I had a very tough time on Mount Washington with wind and wet and weather. This is right before I ended up with double vision. I fell several times. We got lost, but I made it out. And but it really, I started to get pretty fearful there, which really leads into the next piece as well. I think we might be at the end too of this section too, Patty. So as the trail continued to, you also got not only rough conditions, but there were days that I guess are called bluebird days, like that slide and this slide right here were just picture perfect, bathed in sunshine, crystal blue skies. But I really learned the lesson again about acceptance, because this too shall pass. So if you're rainy, wet, miserable, and cold, you knew that down in the future that it was going to get a little, it would be sunny again. And if it was sunny, it would get windy. If it was windy, it would get wet and cloudy. Just acceptance. And when you're living outside, you go with the flow. This brings me to, Wildcat, which is also in New Hampshire. And this is August 29th. It was my mother's birthday. And I remember this day because I called her and was talking with her at Wildcat. Now, we had come down a steep descent, and we had gone up a really wicked one through Pinkham Notch. And this was kind of the things that we were going up. And so I knew that once we got to the top and walked along the ridge for a while, you'd always have to go down. And so Wildcat is a view of Mount Washington off in the distance. This is a beautiful day. There's no clouds on Mount Washington, which makes it crystal clear. That doesn't happen all that often. It was crystal clear the day before I was on it, and then the day after. So this day, it was also crystal clear. I'm gone around the loop several miles on Wildcat. And there's a gondola that comes up, and down there you can see the parking lot and the road. And for some reason, there were kids there coming up the gondola with food and drink, and I broke. I was afraid for my experiences on Washington, and I was about 320 miles from home, and I called Sandy, and I said I was sobbing. I broke, and I said I can't do it, actually, it's the first time I called. I said, honey, I'm sobbing. I can't do it. And she goes, honey, I'm in line at BJ's. Can I call you back? Click. And she hung up. And so that gave me some time to go sob some more. And I called her back, and we talked it out for quite a while. And we agreed that I would try to take myself to the next road. Now, Pickles, Mockingbird, and Just Doug had gone ahead, and they had an idea that they might not ever see me again, because I was that determined to quit. I only had 320 miles left. And Sandy was like, you only have so little left. Like 300 miles is a little bit. When you've gone 1,800, I guess it is. And won't you feel disappointed? And I said, no, that sounds pretty good to me. And I was like, done. She convinced me to go walk away from the gondola, go down to the next road. And so I was listening to a lot of music by this time. I hadn't earlier on the trip, so I had a praise trail mix on my iPhone, and I plugged in about 600 songs, praise trail mix, and I plugged in shuffle. The very first song that came on was the song Never Once, and I listened to these words: standing on this mountaintop, looking just how far we've come, knowing that for every step you were with me. And then going all the way to the bottom, never once did I ever walk alone. Never once did you ever leave me on my own. You are faithful. God, you are faithful. And I started to well up and tear up, and felt a presence so strong that I knew I wasn't alone. And then the very next song out of 650 was Abide With Me. And it says, I have a home, eternal home, but for now I walk this broken world. You walked it first. You know my pain. You show hope can rise again. Abide with me, abide with me. And this is when I heard, don't let me fall, don't let go. Walk with me, never leave. God, abide with me. I just pointed both my trekking poles at the sky and said, and yelled at the top of my lungs, you're being ridiculous right now. But he smiled, I smiled, and I started to come to the place that I knew was going to come. And the faith conquers fear. Well, I knew that, but I'm like, God, you're going to have to show me right now, because there was a place where I had to come down, and it was steep, and it was wicked, and it looked like this, and then there was a place that was even steeper, and I said, all right, God, what now? And I heard a whisper again, and it was turn around. And I'm like, I'm not turning around. I've walked this far. I'm not going that far back. And he's like, turn around. And so what happened was I got it. I was supposed to turn around and literally face my fear. So I turned around and faced the cliff, threw my trekking poles down, and scrambled down backwards using both my hands and feet. You know, all style points were thrown out the window, and I used my long legs to reach way down, and that's how I went down all the steep descents from that point forward. I kind of learned that, trust God, and to me that comes into a theme of obedience, and it's also obedience to your recovery program. That's a part about being diligent, about always being on about your own recovery, is that you have to be obedient to it. You can't let it slack. And then you have great rewards, because then I was actually able to finish. The finish line became in sight. This is about, we're in the 100-mile wilderness where there's about 100 miles where you can't get food. And that peak off in the distance is actually Mount Katahdin. So it's about 13, 14 miles away, about 35 trail miles away, because you got a big loop to get there. So I posted this actual pic on Instagram, and my daughter Sam's tough love, she replied almost instantly with 2 words: yes, Dad. And when I think about that today, it still chokes me up, because I don't know, just to have that impact on a life, never mind your own children, that she was so supportive of me all the way through, to come out and hike with me, to be so part of my adventure, even though she couldn't see me, that she was hanging on every social media update, every pic. And the night before we finished, this was our view from the campground, and those 2 peaks way off in the distance are Katahdin. And Sandy, my wife, was able to come up and join me. And we had a beautiful night in the campground. And on September 23rd, 2015, this is Sandy's view from where she watched us go off down the trail. Those are her feet and her book, and Katahdin's in the distance. It was another perfect day. And what's funny about that is this is what we had to face. And I laugh when I see that, because I still can't believe I actually went up that thing. But you can see the little white blaze, and people get real tiny real quick. And you go up the peak of that pile of rocks, and that's not even the top. That's not even close. And so one of the themes for me was that as I traveled this path, I never knew who was watching me on Instagram or following me. Even, 13, 14 months later, people are still commenting about how they followed me. And that's Pickles, Mockingbird, and Just Doug coming up the thing, coming up the mountain. I was good going uphill. I wasn't that good going down. And I always said that uphill exert, downhill hurt. And you get up to the top and you start to see an incredible view of how high you've climbed and how far you've come. And I'm just amazed by it as anybody that it was even possible for me to do. And there's a clear vision and a spectacular view, and you celebrate. And this is the famous pic that all thru hikers yearn for, is to be on top of the Katahdin sign. And this one is well worn out. They replaced it this year. And I was giving thanks where thanks was due, and I was saying, yes, Dad, because he carried me. I didn't do this. He carried me. And then you get to celebrate with the 4 friends that brought you there, and I'm thinking, like, okay, we're up here, and I just climbed up this incredible mountain. How am I going to get down? And I wasn't sure. But they'll help me. And Just Doug went up ahead, but Pickles and Mockingbird slowed their pace and enjoyed the hike down and helped me get down all the way, so that eventually I could collapse and sob in the arms of the person who matters most, my wife Sandy, who was so supportive and was probably one of the only reasons why I made it. And I drove home, and it said, "Welcome home," right click, a.k.a. Philip or Dad. We missed you more than the miles you hiked to get here. And where's Phil? I'm home. The theme was that don't quit before the miracle happens. And how many times have we heard that in the rooms of recovery? Don't quit before the miracle happens. And I almost did. And I'm glad I didn't, because the miracle was me being able to finally finish and be on the top of Mount Katahdin. Some final thoughts as we wrap this up. My personal stats for the Appalachian Trail, I find these interesting. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. That I took 12 zeros, days of rest. It took me 189 days total, from March 19th to September 23rd. I averaged 11.6 miles a day, but if you take out the zeros, it was probably more like 12.4 the days I walked. But the last 58 days, I only took 1 day of rest. I dropped 56 pounds. I went through 6 pair of boots. My feet grew 1.5 sizes bigger and are still that size. They went from size 10.5 to 12. I guess the 3 other thoughts I wanted to leave you with are, continue your recovery journey no matter what. Stay clean and sober no matter what. Invest in relationships always. I had relationships on the trail, but even the ones that weren't with me on the trail were one of the reasons, the big reasons, and the love and support I received that I was able to do this. Believe in love. And believe that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. I don't think I'm extraordinary. I don't think that at all. I think that I was given a mission and a task, and I was blessed to be able to have him by my side the entire time. And whether your trail is smooth, rocky, muddy, slippery, or stupidly steep, in all times, in all places, let us continue. And so the next part of my story is that I'm writing a book. That's what I'm trying to say. And the name is #continue. I have about 8 days left out of the 189 to write about. So it's probably a few more days, and then the first draft will be finished. And I hope to have it tidied up by the end of the year. The working title is #continue. So that's the next adventure he's called me on, is to just continue. It's one thing to hike the trail, but what's the message behind it? What's the story? And so by being able to do this webinar is just one way for me to carry the message, because God brought me to it, he brought me through it, and now we have to continue carrying the message. I'm still amazed that I was able to do it, especially you look at me in this picture, probably dropped 56 pounds. I've gained 52 back. So I don't look or feel like that as much as I used to, but I'm really grateful. So thank you for your time. Remember, if you look up anything, hashtag AT for recovery. There's still things on the website. And thank you very much.
Wow,
That's it for me.
Phil. Wow, that was just incredible. And, you know, you are extraordinary, and I'm sure lots of people have told you that, but this is just an incredible journey, and especially how you have, you know, related it to recovery every step of the way. And I am just, you know, I feel blessed because I know that, you know, life does translate into all the recovery principles, and as long as we're working those principles in our lives, we're able to share it with others, and you've just, it's just a beautiful presentation. I guess if I haven't seen any comments or questions from our participants, but maybe I could just ask you a couple questions. How about...
You sure can.
Phil, first of all, I can't imagine being one of only, I don't know how many people who have done this, but I'm guessing that you'll never do. You don't have any plans to do it again anytime soon. Is that right?
Not anytime soon, but if the right opportunity came, I'd do it again.
Yeah. It's
But I don't
incredible.
have no
And so,
plan. It was a once-in-a-lifetime journey, that's for sure.
yeah. Well, you know that we look forward to reading the book, and is that book also going to translate, or kind of like related to recovery?
Oh yeah, I mean there's a lot of
Yeah, okay.
there's a lot of recovery. I want to weave the recovery themes all through it, and I think it's. I wrote it well. First of all, because I felt called to write it, but I wanted to leave it as a legacy to my family, and I also want to leave it as a legacy to the recovery community and what recovery has done for me, and this is just one adventure that recovery allowed me to do. So, yeah, that's definitely a theme all the way through it. An interesting story is an interesting story. I met a guy on the first early on. His name was Detox, and he because he detoxed on the trail. The first 5 days he was physically detoxing on the trail, and that's how he started his recovery. 2 years later, he's still in recovery, and one of his jobs was he's working on a sightseeing boat in Hawaii for tourists to go out and look at dolphins. And now I believe he's in Alaska working on cruise ships or something like that. So recovery was good to him, but he used the trail as actually his treatment program. I don't know if I recommend it all the time, but it worked for him.
Right, but it's a good analogy with all paths to recovery, you know. Some choose other paths, you know.
Exactly.
And, yeah. Well, you've been a real pioneer through the recovery movement as well as pioneer on the trail, and
so have you.
I just want to thank you. Yeah, thanks for
you're
all
welcome.
the work that you've done, and I'm really glad that we're going to have this webinar archived on our website and send it out so that lots of more people will be able to access it. So I see some comments. That was inspiring, awesome. That's beautiful. You've shared a lot of touching moments, and congratulations to you and your family. So,
all right, well, thank you.
And, God bless. Take care.
Take care.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and please be sure to complete the feedback survey as we close the webinar today. Take care. Bye-bye.
The leader has disconnected. The conference will be terminated in 5 minutes.